Hey everyone, and welcome back to That Disney Girl. So this week we're going to be talking about some of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to Disney, and that is Disney attraction backstories. I love the Imagineering that goes into creating these fictional background characters, and I love it when these characters kind of intermingle among different attractions or parks. Today we're going to look at the real history behind Phantom Manor in Disneyland Paris. A quick thing about Phantom Manor. Phantom Manor was built in 1992 in Disneyland Paris. It's kind of Disneyland Paris's response to the Haunted Mansion. But many people do say that this attraction is the scariest of the kind of haunted houses that Disney has to offer. The interesting thing about this attraction is that it's actually located in Frontierland, which in Disneyland Paris, for backstory sakes, we're gonna call Thunder Mesa. So in regards to all of the haunted attractions at Disney, this one's gonna have the most cohesive and coherent storyline as it goes throughout. It's also one that connects to the entire land as a whole and maybe other attractions, but we'll get to that later. But the reason the attraction is like this is because Imagineer Tony Baxter recognized that a European Disneyland was gonna need more than just what the typical Disneyland has, especially since there was gonna be so many cultural barriers, very diverse audiences, and the park was going to need to adapt to various languages. So the Imagineering team quickly got to work and they started pulling inspiration from the never before built Western River Expedition, which would have been kind of like a westernized Pirates of the Caribbean, but like I said, it never happened. But the main idea behind many of the attractions at Disneyland Paris, especially Phantom Manor, was to create a really strong storyline so people could understand what was going on no matter what. And this was going to be done through visual cues and music, but not so much language. But now let's get to the fun stuff and talk about the backstory at this attraction. So there's actually two backstories that coincide with Phantom Manor. One is the backstory that opened up with the attraction, and the other one is a backstory that was created with the refurbishment that was recently done. As I mentioned, both of these things kind of play off of each other, so I'm going to explain the first backstory quickly, then we'll pull from what we learned there and see what we added on with the refurbishment backstory that really makes the story a lot more clear and cohesive. Okay, so this story takes place in and around the 1800s and follows a Western settler called Henry Ravenswood. So Henry basically comes to this land, he sees this big mountain, and he starts mining in it, and in it he finds a lot of gold. And of course the mountain that we're talking about is what we know today as Big Thunder Mountain. So right away you can clue in that we've already connected two attractions before even getting into the whole backstory. Henry made so much money from this gold that he decided to found this area as a town, and it was called Thunder Mesa. He ended up meeting a wife named Martha, and he had a daughter named Melanie Ravenswood, which is going to be another key player in the story. So over time, Thunder Mesa became bigger and more successful, especially because of all the gold that was inside of Big Thunder Mountain. But there were a lot of natives to the land, which if you go and visit Disneyland Paris, you can see that Imagineering is kind of tied in with all of their teepees and settlement right outside of the gates of Thunder Mesa, kind of like they're being kept out. But anyways, the natives warned Henry that within this mountain was a spiritual entity called the Thunderbird. Of course, they warned Henry that if he kept on digging, something bad would happen, but Henry didn't listen and he kept on mining. In the meantime, while all of that was happening, Henry's daughter Melanie started meeting lots of suitors to get married to, and every time she met one, he just suddenly seemed to disappear. And it was very clear that Henry did not like any of these suitors. None of them lived up to his expectations, so Melanie became very sad and lonely. Now jumping back to the mountain, I just want to point out that every Big Thunder Mountain has this kind of spiritual entity that lives within it, and every story, depending on which park you're at, is going to have a story that this entity kind of erupts and creates havoc. The story in Walt Disney World is that the town was having a drought. This man, who's a bit of a liar, came and said he was going to fix it, and when he leaves and collects his money without actually doing anything, the mountain causes an entire flood, preventing him from leaving. In Disneyland California, there ends up being an earthquake, just like there is one in Disneyland Paris. Long story short, Henry kept digging, the Thunderbird was a real thing, got very mad, an earthquake happened, and most of the town died. Basically, anyone who's really strongly supporting this digging was gone. But this is where the first version of this story kind of becomes a little bit jarring to me, because right after that death happens, Melanie's already kind of met a suitor, but now her father isn't there to stop her from marrying him. So when Melanie is about to marry her groom-to-be, on the day of their wedding, a phantom shows up in this giant mansion that Henry built when he claimed stake on this land. The phantom lures Melanie's bride up to the attic, where he eventually hangs himself. Now Melanie doesn't believe that her true love would ever leave her, so she's kind of just stuck on this altar and she will not leave the house because she feels like he's always going to be coming back. While this is happening, the Phantom has basically invaded the house and made like a phantom Thunder Mesa. And of course Melanie is basically haunted until the day that she dies, which is kind of nice because then she's actually finally reunited with the love of her life. So now let's look at the new refurbishment version of the story and see what theories we can come up with. So the beginning of the story is basically the same. Henry is going to come to this land, claim it as Thunder Mesa. He's going to discover Big Thunder Mountain. All of that's going to be the same. He'll have his wife, Melanie, will be born. And he's still going to be that overprotective father that we had in the first story. Although this time it seems like he's taking it all to a farther level and there's much more detail included on how he does that. So if we're talking suitors of Melanie, you can actually see all of them in the stretching room when you're going to the attraction, as well as when you're on the attraction. There's going to be epitaphs for all of them. But let's actually look at the backstories and how these suitors ended up dying. So Melanie's first suitor was Barry Claude, and he was an oil salesman that kind of came in and out of Thunder Mesa. And one night he was just mysteriously placed into this forest where a bear was, and he was mauled by the bear to death. Now when I'm trying to connect this to other attractions in Disney World, part of me went to Splash Mountain and thought of Brer Bear, although I think it is quite a stretch to say that. I think it's just a fun theory, and I also think that Brer Bear is someone who would be easily manipulated, and he would definitely do something like that for money or if he was told to. But anyway, let's move on to the next suitor. So the next suitor is my favorite suitor because I think it has the most Imagineering history in it, and that is Rowan D. Falls. Rowan D. Falls is the captain of the Mark Twain Riverboat, which is now another attraction that's connected in this huge backstory. So Rowan came to his fate when his ship was pushed into a waterfall and it fell over and he never made it out alive. But the thing that most excites me about Rowan D. Falls is his last name. So of course there's another Falls family in this Disney backstory canon, and that would be the family that runs the Jungle Cruise. The Jungle Cruise was originally created by Albert Falls. It ended up going to his granddaughter Alberta Falls. It's something that also connects Skipper Canteen over in Magic Kingdom to the attraction there. Definitely think that they were subtly trying to connect the two for anyone who was paying attention to this level of detail in the backstory. Plus, it makes sense. Rowan D. Falls was an explorer just like the rest of his family, and since his last name was Falls and the dates pretty much work out, it does kind of make sense that he would have been Albert Falls' brother. Now right away I started thinking about theories for this, and I think maybe, according to what we know, Albert Falls is dead, but the thing is he was never found dead. He was just missing and presumed dead. I think that one day Albert went looking for his brother, and since his brother fell to his demise off of the waterfall, Albert's never found him, so he's never returned home. Like I said, totally just my theory, but I think it's super interesting. But let's move on to the next suitor. Sawyer Bottom was with Melanie. He ran the Thunder Mesa sawmill, and he was cut in half by a saw. Ignatius Knight was the last suitor, and he worked within the mines, especially with explosives, and one day he just magically blew up. And I think something really fun to know about the Disney Imagineering here is let's just take a quick look at the names. Barry Claude was clawed by a bear. Rowan D. Falls kind of rode down the falls. Sawyer Bottom had his bottom sawed off. And Ignatius Knight's nickname was Iggy Knight, just like you're gonna ignite an explosive. Once again, just another way that Disney Imagineering kind of snuck something fun in there for us. Now with this telling of the backstory, we got to learn a lot more about Melanie's childhood, which I think inspires the action she takes later in life, but we'll get to that. And we also got to learn a little bit more about how Henry acted in his marriage. There was a brother and sister, Jasper and Anna Jones, that worked at the mansion as well as the mountain. Now the sad thing was that these two were basically the only people Melanie had aside from her parents as friends, and they were the only two that her father would allow to get into her life. So the two end up dying, Jasper in 1866 and Anna in 1867. And most people presumed that Henry was cheating on his wife Martha with Anna. And the reason we presume this is because around the attraction you can see the two gravestones, and on Jasper's it says that one made the master happy, and on Anna's it says that one made the master happier. From this we can definitely see that Disney is kind of trying to sneak in another way that Henry is not a good guy here, and we can also see why Melanie kind of clings onto suitors so quickly. She never really had anyone in her childhood, so to be able to have a companion was something that was really important to her, and it ends up making a lot more sense why she doesn't want to even leave the house when she finds out that her groom has killed himself, because she was so close to getting what she wanted and now she lost it again. So like the previous story, Henry will die in the explosion, and Melanie is going to meet her next suitor, which we actually don't have a name for, and on the night of their wedding, a phantom is once again going to lead him up to the attic and he's going to die. Except this time Disney Imagineering has led us to believe that the Phantom is actually going to be Henry, which makes a lot more sense now that we know that it was her father because he always had this jealousy streak to him. And in this version, Melanie is not a ghost or anything, she's a human being, and she's just waiting in this mansion, waiting for her love to come back. All the while being terrorized by this Phantom because he's inviting all of the people that would have died in this earthquake to once again this underground Thunder Mesa Phantom world. Even Madame Leota has an interesting backstory in this tale. She was a medium who was traveling into Thunder Mesa. She ended up perishing during the earthquake and ended up taking residence inside a Phantom Manor. Something about the backstory that doesn't quite make sense to me is why Melanie is one of the only people to survive the earthquake, and the reason for this is that her suitor that she was last with was someone who really wanted to take her away from the town of Thunder Mesa. He really wanted to explore. So I think that possibly when the earthquake happened, these two were off exploring maybe in another town or another land, and when they returned, it was to nothing. That's just me trying to make sense of it all. And throughout the attraction, we can hear Melanie asking everyone to marry her, which in one way I think is a really interesting choice because it makes it seem like whoever she's going to touch or talk to is going to be cursed and killed by the Phantom. But on the other hand, I think it's actually pretty sad because it shows how desperate she was for companionship, which, as we've already discussed, heavily ties into her childhood. So that is the story of Phantom Manor, and I think it is so cool how many different backstories and how many characters that this story creates, and how it really ties into different attractions throughout the park. From what I have seen in many videos, it seems like the refurbishment done in Phantom Manor was fantastic. They put the Phantom in so many more scenes, so it really starts to tell that story that he was once related to Melanie and that he is now kind of there to haunt her. But if there are any other theories that you can attach to this attraction or any other attraction that's associated with it, definitely let me know below in the comments. It is literally my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to Disney. And if you like talking Disney theories or anything Disney, just make sure that you give this video a nice big thumbs up. And if you're a true Disney nerd like me, make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. I mean, we have a lot of happy subscribers here, but there's always room for one more.